trying to take decision making away from our local officials. I always get a kick out of that because they're like, hey, my voters see me at HEB, Whataburger. I mean, they see me out and about. They'll tell me if they don't like what we're doing.
Welcome to United We Podcast, the official podcast of the United Corpus Christi Chamber of Commerce, the only chamber podcast in South Texas. I'm your host, Al Ariola Jr., and we're here to explore the latest business insights, community stories, and opportunities shaping the coastal bend. Whether you're a business owner or just passionate about our region, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Once again, welcome back, Chamber family and friends, to United We Podcast. Today, we are joined by Mark Scott, a proud Chamber member through San Jacinto title, and you might also otherwise know him as a city councilman at large as well. But before we get into that, Mark, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Like to do this.
Hey, before I talk shop, so to speak, politics, I did want to get into your participation in the Chamber. You've been
Absolutely.
a long-standing Chamber member. You and your wife have been real instrumental in our leadership Corpus Christi program as well. You also even worked at the Chamber, you said?
I did. I worked for the Chamber in the early 90s. I was governmental affairs.
Really?
Yeah, as I was working on my master's degree. I worked at the Chamber. And then Carol was past chairwoman of the Chamber. I was past vice chairman of the Alliance back before when they broke it up. We've been active members for a long time.
You know, that story of the Chamber when I guess we were housing the EDC and the CVB, right? I think that, what was that, late 90s?
Late 90s. I remember I was in the room at a board meeting one day when I went, yep, this isn't going to work.
Yeah. No, you can, in Houston, the partnership, they're.
I think it works. I think the model works.
You know what? I hear otherwise. I hear it from a lot of small businesses that they feel that there's nothing tailored to them. And so I think I can understand the math of why that separation, then get a little bit more hyper-focused on those specific areas. And I think you've seen that success, like especially with respect to economic development, tourism.
What happened then was we, the executive committee hired the CEO, but also hired the current EDC director as the number two with a clear indication he was not to be touched. And so they hired a CEO, but didn't let him manage his staff. And that's when I went, this isn't going to work. This isn't going to work.
Yeah.
And I was not, a player. I wasn't of stature to go, that doesn't sound right to me. I just remember sitting in the back of the room going, this is not going to end well. And sure enough, they broke it up, years later.
Well, in that time, I was in college. I was here finishing in 2003. I mean, I think it had already been split off. But I always talk about the way the economy was then compared to now. Tectonic shift, monumental
tectonic shift,
yeah.
Monumental change now compared to then. I mean, back then, we were just trying to get another McDonald's kind of thing, and now it's talking about, a massive economic development opportunities and what GCGV has done, and now, all these other potential. I think there's water issues associated with new industry coming to town.
Well, to interrupt you on that, that's what I was going to say. What do you think right now is our biggest challenge or limitation when it comes to economic development?
It's all about water.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a meeting this morning about water. Somebody else I was talking on the phone and went, I just want to talk about water.
Yeah.
It's water. On the campaign trail, somebody said, well, I don't want to talk about water. I want to talk about jobs. I went, well, here's the deal. No water, no jobs. And they went, well, what about streets? I went, let's talk about streets. You and I want to get somebody else to move to town to help us fix the potholes. Here's the problem. Nobody else is moving to town without a new job, no new jobs without water. So again, it's all about water. So I think that's appropriately the focus of at least the city right now.
And I've been in the chamber world about 16 years in Texas exclusively, and I've seen the conversation around water, especially the past decade, that we almost knew that this was coming.
Well, the city has had a plan for decades, and it's generally, you want to be at 100%,
right?
And then if it gets down to like you think you're 90% of what you probably need, you start planning. When it gets to 80%, you pull the trigger. So it gets to 70, the new water comes online. Bump, 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 bump. And the issue is if you miss a beat, right, and you don't make that decision for whatever reason, then you get in this situation we're in. I mean, I think we knew 4 or 5 years ago that we needed to pull the string on desal. We just chose not to do it, and this is what happens when you miss a beat.
Right. I maybe not chose to do it, but I've heard, and I don't want to compare it to it. It's been kind of like the cat that has 9 lives, and
Yeah. I think we knew we needed to do something. We just, what's that term? Failure to launch the movie. We just knew, and it's expensive, right? So when you talk about if you agree that the next water is desalination, that's a big jump in cost. I mean, it's like, I remember we're on the regional water planning group. It was like the lake water's, a dollar, and the pipeline is $300, and desalination is $1,200 or $2,400. I mean, it's a big jump. So I get that. But this is what happens when you get behind the curve, and we're in a world of hurt.
Yeah. Well, and you said a pretty poignant quote on the dais the other day with the water workshop, where at the end of the day, you got to kind of keep your eyes on the road, the immediate road ahead, and at the same time, though, if you're lucky enough,
that's
to
the
keep
third
your
eye. So I always say that you want to keep the public expects you to keep both eyes on the road in front of you, but they kind of like you to keep that third eye on the horizon, and if you don't, you lose sight of the horizon. Next thing you know, you're behind the curve. And part of it was we've had such dynamic growth in the last 10, maybe 15 years. So that accentuated. I mean, you think you're going to grow a demand of a gallon a day. But if somebody shows up and says, I need 10 gallons, well, then you've messed that model up. So it's not all our fault.
Right.
But I think we saw the answer. And I do think we have a plan, by the way.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I segue into that? I think, and this is the way I articulate it, and I always tell people, I like to use little words in short sentences. I think it's a today, tomorrow, and next week. In this water workshop we had last week, I said, hey, I love you guys. I think you're all great projects, but you're next week. I need to talk about today. And today is getting through the next 6 months, 3 years. That's adding wells to put water in the Nueces River. And by the way, the first well was completed, I think, last week. They're testing it this week. That rig is moving to another site to start the second well. I think we'll end up with 7 or 10 of them. And incidentally, we own the land, which means we don't have to pay minerals. And that's about a $200,000 a year savings. So we're saving some money there. So dig some wells, put the water in the river. Improve the Mary Roads pipeline to get it up to 75 million gallons a day. That's 20 more. Now we're in the minutia. But there's also a chance to get buy or rent some water that Formosa took away from us about 10 years ago. That's another 10. And then we can talk to CC Polymers about getting 10 from them. So I think that when you add all those up, it'll get us to when desalination starts to flow. And this is a big week, by the way. TCEQ has a hearing on Thursday. A whole bunch of us are going up there, look them in the eye. We think we'll get the permit. We deserve the permit. And then we're off to the races. I do think.
Well, and the chamber wrote a pretty strong letter.
You did. Thank you. That was a great letter you wrote. In fact, you provided leadership. Because there's a lot of associations is, hey, we want to support, but we don't even know what to say or how to say it. And I think a lot of people went, oh, that's what we want to say.
And, and when we were crafting our language, a lot of it was obviously looking through the lens, the way a business community does look through things. It's with objectivity. It was kind of void of prejudice or biases or a perspective that maybe was painted otherwise than the facts and the data. And so that's really, I think the statement spoke for itself, that it was a very objective perspective on where we are, why we need it, and why it is a good project.
Right, and it is a good project. I mean, the city hired consultants and said it's not gonna kill the environment. In fact, a lot of things that happen in this desal actually improve the environment. They're going to take all the heavy metals out through the reverse osmosis, and what goes back into the ship channel will be void of the heavy metals that came in.
And I know that Israel and some other countries have done this well. They've been at it for a long, long time, and maybe haven't had some of the minutia of politics that we deal with here. But I guess we're innovating in this space. I don't think we're bragging about that enough.
I don't think we are. We are innovating. We're doing this DAF. There's certain things that we're doing that actually inject oxygen back into the water. So, this concern that we're going to have dead zones, it's actually just the opposite. The water that's going to come out will be more oxygenated than the water that came in, So, I mean, it's not perfect, right? So it'll increase the salinity level maybe 1 point. So if it's at 25, it'll come out 26 when it's all said and done. What's that, 1,000 yards away. But yeah, you're right. We've got some really cool technology that we're using.
Well, and then moreover too, just across the country, I know there's some in California. Is there the other one, New Mexico?
There's one in California, and then there's one in Tampa that we're looking at.
And I think
there's one in El Paso.
Where I'm going, well, I was going to say Texas, but in many ways, the seawater component to it, we're very much, especially in Texas, leading the way. But
right.
there's
a seawater plant in Carlsbad that's functional. And then Tampa did a seawater, and that's what we've really looked at. Then there's from Perth, I think Australia is one that has similar attributes to our environment that we've spent a lot of energy. But Kiewit's done a lot of this. When you talk about people that build desal plants, Kiewit is the king, and they're heavily involved. They're designing it as we speak. And they built the facility in California, so they can go, so that didn't work well, this worked well, but what if we make these changes? So we have the right group that's on board, and they should come to us in November with what they call the price not to exceed, cost not to exceed, and so that's when that'll be the final decision.
And I know a lot of our angst in economic development is associated with water, like you tied to it. But let's say that the faucet was completely turned on. We're full flow water. What does the next 5 to 10 years look like for Corpus Christi?
That's a really, really good question that you try not to have right now, right? Because when I'm about to tell you, like, people don't want to hear that. The reality is when we do these projects we're doing now, and when desal comes on in May of 28, we're going to have excess water. And we're going to want to sell that water because we're paying for it. And the more people we get on board, the less it costs you and I. Well, but we're going to have to change the way we charge for that. We need to charge a tap fee to help pay for all the infrastructure.
So I brought up my experience in the chamber world for the past 16 years. My first bite at the apple was in Del Rio, Texas, where I'm from, which at the time was very water wealthy. There's Lake Amistad there.
Sure.
A lot of groundwater, a lot of ag, wells, you name it. And so at some point, I kind of spoke in that same tone that you just did, is that I was thinking as a business person, as a chamber person, that, hey, this is a commodity and we're lucky we have it. And if we can get to that point of selling it, well, let's go. Because and back to, like I said, for the past decade, people have been looking at it like it is the next gold because, quite frankly, it is. I mean, it's the commodity that everything needs, like you said. And so
we can sit on it, but A, we don't get new jobs. And B, you and I pay more per 1,000 gallons because we're not sharing the cost, or we can go get somebody else to come to town and help fix a pothole.
Well, and so back to my point of that experience, if you will, I remember some of my board members were not all too pleased with that perspective, and I guess now in hindsight I can understand where their concerns was specifically some of our bankers in the local market were trying to protect what they felt was their investments, and I've certainly learned the economics of water fast, and I certainly learned at that point in time too that saying "water's for whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting."
Right. Yeah, and the one caveat I would give you that I'm still frustrated is that we don't know, what this is going to mean, and we have a report that's just not finished. All right, so we're in the worst drought of record, but the question is if we add the water from the wells, how many days does that get us? If we add more water from Texana, how many more days does that get us? If we get the Formosa water, how many more days? And so you want to be able to look at that and go, yep, we're going to make a worst case scenario. We're going to make it to desal. But then you also want to carry that study further and said, okay, once desal comes on, and by the way, you'd assume eventually it's going to rain, but once desal comes on, how much more water do we have left? And then of that, how much do we want to sell? And then you're making decisions, database decisions, and I think we need that study. And I know the Corolla company cities used before is working on it, but I'm pretty frustrated we don't have that yet.
Well, now we're in the legislative session and we're seeing vehicles move, bills being introduced that might help us get to that path of water security, not obviously only here in the Bay, but obviously across the state. I know you guys are monitoring those moving parts. We're monitoring those moving parts. Beyond the water is what I was hoping we could get beyond if we're lucky.
Is there such a thing?
But is there anything else that you've been, I guess, curious? I know we've been pushing windstorm, and shout out to Representative Hunter on filing that bill.
And did you see that report? He's listed as the third most powerful legislator in Texas.
I did.
I told him what a great American he is. Right?
And you know who I was also impressed by? Denise. She was
I did not see that.
For being a freshman, she was pretty high up. She was in the higher third.
Really?
Yeah.
I think her relationship with the governor's been very helpful. I think the lieutenant governor's very supportive of Adam Hinojosa. I think it's a good time to be a legislator from a Corpus Christi area.
I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, I think we are well served and well represented right now, and they do seem to be, especially unifying all our perspectives on how we could get some goals pushed over the goal line in this legislative session.
Well, and from a city perspective, we still have ongoing, arguments with our legislators.
Conversations.
Yeah, the conversations. You're so much better at this. Trying to take decision making away from our local officials. I always get a kick out of that because they're like, hey, my voters see me at HEB, Whataburger. I mean, they see me out and about. They'll tell me if they don't like what we're doing.
I was talking to Roland about that, and I feel like, especially maybe our representatives are trying their best to fight the fight for our perspective. But I feel like you guys are dealing with the sins of the bigger cities that they've
absolutely
maybe kind of overextended their purview on what the Constitution says they can and can't do.
I saw some. We got a report this weekend, and a bunch of these bills are any city above some number. But we're right in that middle.
Right.
You don't know if we're in or out. I don't know. Right. We don't want to be in.
Right.
We want to be out to be left to our own decision making skills. But I want to. I tell you, you asked about what else, and the one thing I didn't want to leave undiscussed is we still got to talk about the next week water. You don't want to, it's not all about the wells and what we need to do now in Inner Harbor. There is a time, and I think it's in the next 6 months, you really start to look at that next supply. And we had that water workshop last week. There's some really unique opportunities out there. We shouldn't lose sight of that. I just want to get that out there. I don't think you walk away from the next week's water conversation. But we have a finite amount of staff and energy, and we need them focused on today and tomorrow's water supply issues. And so if we can get over that, I think we can wake up in November. I think we'll wake up in November and go, yep, we're going to make this, or it's going to be okay. Regardless, the important part, regardless, or as I like to say, irregardless of whether it rains or not. That's what you want, is a plan in place that you feel good about and you trust, that barring any catastrophic event will get us through this crisis.
Yeah, no, and I feel and I hope that we can, like you said, keep the third eye open and not get too short-sighted because of the situation that we're in. Like you said, for all we know, next month we have some major rain event.
Right. I've thought about this. It's going to rain. Like, we're fine. No. We're not fine. We're not fine.
Yeah.
Maybe it was you that somebody texted me during the council meeting, like, hey, man, don't lose sight of next week's water.
But I was thinking that. I mean, I was thinking
that's the flaw in my little today, tomorrow, and next week conversation.
No, but I was encouraged in hearing from the dais, all the council members seem to have that perspective. It's like, okay, we know we have a need now. We know we have a need sooner than later, and we know there's a long-term plan here that we got to stick to, especially if we want to continue to garner resources from other levels like the state level. Yeah.
Well, and I heard some interesting things. I went to a luncheon today, and actually it was Gil was talking about this, about how, we lose sight of, we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that the jet fuel in Dallas-Fort Worth Airport comes from here.
That's right. That's right.
And now I'm told that they've got another distribution line going into Bergstrom, and they're working on getting one to San Antonio International Airport. I mean, what happens in Corpus Christi affects the world. Third largest exports community in the world. Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Corpus Christi, Texas. So we need to recognize our worth in the world and then keep pursuing opportunities.
Yeah. Not that I want to see more direct flights out of anywhere other than CCIA.
Right. Maybe that's what we should do, is like, we're going to say no more jet fuel for Dallas, but you can fly your planes to Corpus.
Exactly.
And we'll fly like this.
We'll fill them up here.
Maybe that's what we should do. So, but I guess my point is that, we just need to remember what happens in Corpus Christi affects the world. And that's why I had laughed the other night. I was at 11:35 at night. And I'm Friday night, 11:35, and I'm on the phone with one of our plant managers. And I went, Mark, you're going to have to reevaluate your life. What are you doing on the phone talking water at 11:35 on a Friday night? But my point is, that's because it's that important. Right.
And obviously there's that much concern.
Right.
That an 11 o'clock call, on a Sunday night. Yeah.
And there's actually, I think, a meeting today with the industries in the city, because the city wants to know their thoughts. And they've been very helpful, by the way. at least several of our bigger industries have stepped up to the table and said, what can we do to help you, Corpus Christi? Well, we're doing this pipeline improvement. We're not really sure how we're going to work through the electrical. Got it. I'm going to send my electrical engineers on your team. So it's really been interesting and kind of under the, behind the curtain, what industry's done to help us kind of pursue this. And then we've got some great people. I mean, Drew Molly we call him our water czar. He's the CEO of the water. I mean, he was up there in Austin testifying last week. He's highly respected. Senators talked to him. And then Nick, who's managing some of our projects, had the relationship with the well company to get the rigs. When no one else can get a rig, we've got a rig 45 days ago that started drilling for these wells. So we've got a good group of people, and I do think they're working well with industry. I will tell you, though, I mean, we're cutting it close. We're cutting it close on the water side.
Well, to bring it back home while I still have you, the chamber world that you've been deeply a part of, you and your wife, what keeps you coming back?
Well, a couple things. One, I think the chamber has a profound impact on business growth. I think other associations look to the chamber for direction and support, and so I've liked that. I've also liked the fact that the business community has to have a voice, and they should use that voice. And you guys have been very good in conveying thoughts and interests and concerns from the business community to our elected officials. Because if not, somebody's going to fill that void, right? I mean, elected officials are going to hear it,
or the void will be noticed, right?
Sure. Well, if a void's noticed, then usually somebody goes and finds a way to fill it.
Right.
And you and I would, I think, submit that we need the business community to fill that. I don't think there's a void. I think the business community is well heard.
I think where I was going with that is that if we're not speaking up, then maybe, you know what I mean?
Yeah, if you're not speaking, then they're not hearing.
And
don't leave us to our own devices. Don't leave council members to our own devices.
See, that was my polite way of saying that. Exactly, yeah.
We have a retreat coming up at the end of the month. And I was talking to our facilitator today. I don't know her. She's introducing herself. And that was kind of a message. Hey, you got to come help us. Don't leave us to our own devices. Help us be successful. Because there's, the reality is I've done well in life. And I have a big birthday, frankly, this week. But, it's not about me. It's about you, and it's about these young folks in the room, and it's about your members and the members' children. I mean, I think we want to leave the playground better than we got there. And so that's why I'm involved, and I think that's a voice the chamber helps.
Yeah. And if I could compliment the council and city administration, like I said, I've lived here once upon a time, and I'm back, and I see the changes, and I think it's quite unfair when sometimes you hear that sentiment from the residents that sometimes, well, my streets. Well, welcome to any city in Texas or this country. I mean, the people.
I'm always amazed at that. Have you been to San Antonio? When was the last time you were downtown Houston? Did you drive downtown Austin? Have you been to New York City?
And I get it, right? But again, just to have perspective on if we do want to become that city, that next city, which I do believe we're the Texas of tomorrow. When you see the economic development, the way we're developing compared to other parts of this state, it has all the right pieces, and there, you know what I mean? Like there's not a gap that we need to fill. That all these pieces.
I think our education system is built for what's coming.
Yeah.
I think at the end, the Port of Corpus Christi is certainly an asset. I think in the end, it's about water, and if you can fill the water void, I think it's Katie bar to the door. Now, again, you don't want to give the water away, and you don't want to end up in the situation we're in now. But you get enough water, I think businesses will come. I think you're right. I think this is going to be where, and I think that's where the governor, if you talk to the governor, he's all into water. He gets it. That's the key to the future of Texas. And if you're going to do, especially desal, well, okay, do it on the coast, right? But then put industry on the coast so that we all benefit, right? So the jobs are here, the families are here, economic development's here.
There you go, sir. Well, Mark, I want to especially thank you for your time today, especially also for your service on council, your loyal chamber membership. Also, too, your wife has been so instrumental in our leadership Corpus Christi advisory committee.
She's the better half.
So shout out, Carol. Thank you for all your help on that. Mark, do you want to just one shout out to the audience? Anybody?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna tell you, I love what I do. I love being a city council member. It is, I mean, you're making sausage in public, and sometimes that's ugly.
Yeah.
But you're making sausage, right? You're trying to make a difference. And I've been blessed. My kids, Chris and Alex, both live here, and it's funny. But maybe the second meeting I was talking to Christopher, and he goes, "Hey, Dad, don't do this." I went, "What?" He says, "You were doing this. Like, let's go. He goes, "It's a bad optic, you know." So even my son's become my critic now.
There you go.
So now if you look close, my fingers will be below and I'll be doing this, like, okay, let's go. Right.
Out of sight.
Out of sight. Then worst case scenario, Carol will tell me what to do. So.
Shout out, Chris. All right. Well, Mark, thank you again for your time. I also want to thank the audience for joining us, and we will see you again next time.